It has been a hot minute since we have taken the air here on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. That is my fault. This is this guy's fault, not that guy's fault. And that guy is John Sheeran. The guy who is at fault, is Anthony Cosenza. And like I said, this is the Orange and Black Insider. Now, we've had some personal things come up, at least for myself, but we've had some good professional developments come up as well. And you see a nice new sponsorship logo courtesy of the fine folks at Believe to forge the partnership with FanDuel. And not only we partnered with Foco, and there's a link in our description, by the way, for some new bobbleheads that just dropped today, an Ellie Dela Cruz and a Joe Burrow one. So go check those out. But we are now also working with the fine folks at FanDuel for all you gamblers out there, all you sports bettors. It's good to be back on the air. We haven't even touched on the Eagles game yet, but we're going to give a lot of thoughts about that. I know it's back in the rearview mirror. And what may be ahead for the Bengals, who's been impressing now that we're about a couple weeks in to training camp. I'm talking too much. I haven't even let John say hello yet. John! Hi.
Hey, what's up, man? Just I guess shout out to any other potential sponsors with the word "fan" in it. You know, we have a pretty partnership going, so I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head aside from our lovely sponsors as shown on the screen. But if you're out there, hit us up because that's what
Fanatics is one, right?
There you go.
Fanatics one, yeah. So let's just keep it going. Or if you have your own company, that sort of thing that you feel you want to get in front of some people that watch our show and listen to the shows on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, hit us up at the obinsider@gmail.com and we will we'll talk to you about it. But regardless, this is OBI, part of the Believe network, and we are pleased to not only be on the Believe network, but now partnered up with FanDuel. So that is a really cool announcement that is a very recent development that we wanted to start the show with. Now we got to get down to some business, John, because like I said, I've been lagging, buddy. But look, this game's in the rear view, and we saw a lot of things that you said, hey, nice, and we saw a lot of other things that we said, oh boy, this looks like a broken record. So I guess let's start, because it's been a little bit since we've taken the air. Let's start with the positives. The first team offense looked awesome. And Jamar Chase looks like he's in week 10 form, as does Burrow for the most part. I thought Chase Brown showed a lot of his trademark dynamic nature, versatile nature. And they just kind of moved up and down the field in the preseason game week 1. At this point, you're kind of like, hey, they were out there for a couple of series at basically a full quarter, and first team offense looked pretty good.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I was looking for was how Burrow is going to be in the pocket. That's the whole reason why he wants to play these games. And of course, the last throw that he made on the first drive, or I believe it was the second drive, one of the last throws he made was he got hit right after he hit Jamar Chase on the classic, just out route, cuts back upfield. Looked like Jamar Chase was running like 80% speed, and he still outran the entire
everybody
switch. Yeah, just gauge who you're going up against. But yeah, Keely Ringo, the former Georgia cornerback, didn't really stand a chance covering Jamar Chase. Pretty surgical operations, as expected from, even if the Eagles have a pretty deep roster overall, the Bengals offense should have taken care of business. The offensive line, I think for the most part, looked okay. You feel pretty comfortable about the tackles. Dylan Fairchild's getting a lot of love, and I think deservedly so. He handled Ty Robinson, who was a potential Bengals target, a defensive tackle out of Nebraska. He went up against him a handful of times, pretty much won every single one of those reps. So first time out on the NFL field for him, and he handled his business pretty well. Not so much of Lucas Patrick, which is, we'll get to that kind of in a second, but yeah, they weren't even with Mike Gesicki, and Noah Fant wasn't on the field either, as he was still getting ramped up, so that you didn't even see everything that you wanted from the tight end room. But Burrow looks comfortable. He was out of structure a couple times. I think he threw the first touchdown that didn't count. It was also out of structure, and he was also kind of making something out of the pocket. So that was really good to see. The timing and everything, his feel for the pressure was there. So it didn't look like he was shaking off any rust like he was, last year against the Patriots, which was very nice to see from an optimistic standpoint.
So there were a couple of things. One, slightly humorous, I guess, but like you said, I would say 3 or 4 of the offensive linemen looked pretty solid. There were some nice pockets there. Now, again, not every single Philadelphia starter was out there. So, you're kind of going up against a blend of players. That being said, the Bengals, like you just said, the offense did what they were supposed to do in a scenario like that. They carved them up pretty well. And Jamar Chase made some spectacular catches. That toe tap on the sideline was just incredible. And Chase Brown, like I said, Charlie Jones got in the mix a little later on, which was nice to see. There was a little bit of a problem when Jake Browning got out there. The offense hit a stall there, which, look, Browning, the hope is, whether it is he or Ritter as the backup guy, the hope is that if, God forbid, there is something that happens to Joe Burrow and he cannot play, those guys would be out with the first team offense, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, etc. Not so much some of the second and third string guys that you saw them out there with. Regardless, there was a noticeable difference, at least in overall production, between Ritter and Browning in week 1. But we've seen this from Browning in preseason play too. He kind of, lets it loose a little bit, and you have to figure the backup quarterback just not getting as many, practice reps as Joe Burrow does, particularly in the offseason like this, when the emphasis is we got to get wins early on. We got to start faster than we have. So, you kind of take that with a grain of salt. I thought the offense looked pretty good overall, namely the starters. And then you move on to the defensive side of the ball, John. And yes, they were missing 4 of their starters, 4 of their main guys on defense. So that does, I'm terrible at math. What is that? 30% or so of your overall starters on the unit. You take that into account. Yes, the Eagles have, some good players. And like you said, one of the deepest, if not the deepest roster in the NFL, but it looked eerily similar in a lot of ways to the year prior.
Yeah, I think it says something when the Eagles' backup offensive line is much more in sync and knows what to do compared to the Bengals' starting defensive line, albeit no Trey Hendrickson. You're trying to implement Shamar Stewart as best as you can, but you're catching him up to speed. It was unfortunate when you have guys who are out of position, out of gaps, right? Demetrius Knight, TJ Sladen on that first big run with Will Shipley, who ran for 40-something yards. It got better as the game went on, but the disparity in terms of preparedness from, again, the reserves from the Eagles and the starters from the Bengals was pretty telling. And it's not too concerning for me because while this defense hasn't changed a ton in terms of personnel, there are still new guys out there trying to find their way. Mm-hmm. Demetrius Knight being one of the biggest ones, right? I thought that he had more shakiness in his performance, maybe compared to even Barrett Carter, who was drafted obviously a couple rounds later. And, Sladen kind of settled in a little bit. So did Chris Jenkins, who kind of got in there. It was really cool seeing Shamar Stewart and his athleticism just kind of take over at a couple of times. And that's really exciting to see. But you saw that, he's just, again, as advertised, doesn't really know what he's doing quite yet, loses his feet too much, and doesn't really know what he's doing with his hands, right? But when he's got open space, and he's got a clear path to the quarterback, no one's going to get there quicker than him, right? So you're seeing the value of getting him on the field as quick as possible. You're seeing other guys get some wins as pass rushers, again, against backups. But regardless, I'm not too concerned because there are still some moving parts here and some new integrations with the defense. I think there was just an expectation for them to be a lot better because they've been, showing out against the Bengals offense in training camp. But of course, when you go up against a new opponent, new wrinkles, sometimes you're not as prepared as you are. And I think we kind of saw that firsthand.
Yeah, and then like you mentioned, there are a couple of guys, one definitely in Demetrius Knight. So we can say, hey, there's 4 starters not in the lineup, but technically you are integrating in one or two new guys in a starting capacity in this game. And that obviously has an effect. You have a new defensive coordinator. We know there are going to be growing pains. It's just about how quickly they can get out of those growing pains. And to your point about Stewart, yes, and it sounds kind of like, well, of course, he has to have a clear path. Well, the point is, with his athleticism, is he creates more clear paths for himself because of that than other players. So he will give himself more opportunities. I believe he was on the pressure where there was a near interception kind of back across the middle. And he look, the young defensive players, we mentioned the three, Carter, Knight, Stewart. Yes, there were some spots where you go, oh man, that needs some improvement. But the activity level, the tenacity, I think overall also showed, aside from some of the hiccups. I think you're going to see some guys that are very active players out there. And they look for contact, that sort of thing. Still though, the Eagles did score points early and often, ended up winning the game, but I don't know. I'm maybe a little more concerned than you about the defense, but at the same time, I think there is a pretty big asterisk next to that because of the missing players, because of the new players you are integrating into the system.
It definitely wasn't good. I think at the end of the day, though, it's still relatively early days. And this is still, I think, a unit in which there needs to be tempered expectations at the beginning of the season because, again, a lot of new faces and a lot of just still learning what the scheme is because it is a new scheme. But I think there is still enough of a confidence level where they can find themselves in the middle of the season. But this was, I think, just a warning sign that, hey, like even early on against maybe some not so great offenses, you're going to have these mishaps, especially, Anthony, if there are serious injuries at cornerback. You didn't have Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt for this game. Nothing's wrong with them in terms of the long run. They're still being integrated in, but you didn't have them in this game. And Josh Newton, DJ Ivey specifically, did not look capable at all. Like they were just pretty awful out there. And I'm just saying that just bluntly. I think Ivey especially had maybe his worst NFL exhibitional regular season game that he's ever had. And that was concerning because you had Tanner McKee basically look like Tom Brady out there. Meanwhile, Jake Browning is struggling to complete a pass. And just going back to Browning real quick, like I'm concerned about because it didn't really have anything to do with like pressure in his face or guys not getting open. He was just erratic and inaccurate. And the dichotomy between him and what Tanner McKee was doing on the other side of the ball, just torching up a Bengals secondary that looked completely clueless out there. That was my biggest concern. Like the depth at cornerback for this team doesn't look particularly promising. And I guess if I want to go back to the quarterback real quick, I don't think that there is still a competition for quarterback 2, but that game should have opened some eyes and maybe started the conversation and said, what if we do give Desmond Ridder some second string reps? What if we do get him more involved in the next game just to see what we have here? Because at the end of the day, he was a third round pick. He does have some natural talent with him, whereas Jake Browning was an undrafted free agent who's more in tune with what the offense is. But that performance from Browning, I think on his own, independent for just what he was doing, not necessarily with the other surrounding factors, that was very eye-opening and concerning because you shouldn't expect him to be as bad as he was.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I will say Josh Newton did have kind of almost a near interception, but got, I guess, mossed for lack of better words by, was it Johnny Wilson? I think it was. Big target. I think he's like 6'6", kind of a hybrid player in a lot of respects, but he did have a chance at an early interception, had his hands on the ball, and then it just got kind of scooped out of his hands midair for a reception the other way. But still, even if you kind of want to say, hey, I mean, he was right there, the play was made. And to your point, I mean, whether it was that play, Ivy got burned a couple times and that sort of thing. So they need to start figuring out some things pretty quickly on that side of the ball. But the Bengals overall, they lose the game. You saw some things from the special teams unit. You saw some things from the first team offense. And preseason game 1, I think overall, you never like to lose a game, even if it's a exhibition one. But overall, I think there were still a lot of things that we saw were expected, given who was in and out of the lineup, given how well the starting offense played, that sort of thing. I think that kind of stuff was a little expected for preseason game 1. Next game is going to be a big one. And then, of course, we'll see exactly what happens. It's unsure if the starters will get a lot of time in preseason game 3. That I think the prevailing thought is no. But I think they're going to use these first 2 games for that type of situation. But overall, I think there's a lot to be expected there. But there are some guys who have, whether it was in that game or continue to have some buzz about them in Bengals camp. And that there are a number of names. TJ Slayton's name has been mentioned. And, our buddy James Rapine kind of mentioned him as a guy who continues to stand out. I know Charlie Jones has stepped up a little bit more as a receiver. And so you're starting to see some nice things from guys in either quasi starting roles or, supplemental roles, that sort of thing, that are starting to shine a little bit. You saw some nice things in camp from Burton early on. He had this kind of mysterious injury. There was a little bit of drama behind that, but he went to social media and I don't know if clarified is the right word, but he said, it was an injury. It wasn't something else, that sort of thing. Who knows? Regardless, there are still some guys showing up, whether they are new faces or guys that we've earmarked as guys that need to have a good camp to make a roster push.
Yeah, I think right now at safety, like you have Geno Stone, I think he's officially week to week with a hamstring injury. He got hurt a handful of plays into the Eagles game, and yet both Tyson Anderson and Dijon Anthony since taking some reps with the first team at free safety. But Jordan Battle next to him, right? Like I thought played pretty well against the Eagles, and he continues to have a really good camp. He picked off Joe Burrow for the first time in like 11-on-11 work a couple of days ago, a couple of practices ago, and that's kind of been the theme of his training camp. He's been in the right spots. He's making the quick reads on the ball, and he's getting hands on the ball. So that's obviously extremely good to see. Cam Taylor-Britt kind of returned to practice today and had a really good session against Jamar Chase. So that's obviously very promising. I think that's been kind of the theme for him, but he was dealing with some sort of an injury the past week and a half. He wasn't really concerned about it. He knew he didn't really have to play against the Eagles because he would be back. Dax Hill looks to be settling in primarily at slot cornerback. It seemed like they were kind of going back and forth between him on the outside, but it seems like the slot, the nickel, is where he's trying to establish himself in a home, and he continues to look good there. So again, I think there's more promising pieces on this defense that we'll see in the coming weeks than what we saw against Philadelphia. And like you said, Slayton continues to kind of really establish himself there. So the one mishap that he had against the Eagles, I don't really expect that to happen again. I think this defense has a lot to prove with this week going into the Commanders game because of what the buzz was about for how they played against the Eagles for sure.
And lo and behold, you mentioned it a few minutes ago about Ritter with maybe getting some time with the twos, and that's what happened on Wednesday. He got some time with the second team offense just to kind of see what that looks like for the team. But overall, I think, like you said, Dylan Fairchild, another one who's been just impressing. He just kind of stepped right into that spot. And now is, looking just like he hasn't really had a rookie misstep or that sort of thing. He's just been right there and melded into that line pretty well. Again, that we'll talk about this in a second, but the right guard spot remains an issue for the Bengals. But what players are you either expecting or hoping to be in this category of surprisingly impressive over the next couple of days or the next couple of games in the preseason?
I would say that it's not like a huge surprise, but it is expected for Noah Fant to be more integrated, more involved.
Yeah.
I've kind of seen that the past couple of days in practice. Paul Dillard Jr. had a good report for his walkout today. Said that there's been more of an uptick in terms of tight end screens, and particularly involving Noah Fant. That seems to be the skill set that they want to utilize the most with him. His yards after catch ability, it's unique compared to other tight ends on this team. And by the way, shout out to Tanner Hudson for his 2-touchdown performance against the Eagles, because he continues to make plays in these environments where you always think he's got 1 foot out the door, where his spot doesn't look too secure, and he continues to make plays to prove his value here. 2 touchdowns with 2 different quarterbacks, I think, is going to firmly secure his spot on the roster in some capacity. But Noah Fant's still here too. So you have a handful of tight ends that have a really good shot at making this team. And the fact that they went and got out Noah Fant for his specific skill set, it means a lot too. So he had a really good interview, I believe, with Jaron May of WLWT, saying that I didn't know this, Anthony, but he was born in Omaha, Nebraska. Obviously, he went to Iowa for college, so he's kind of a Midwestern kid, right? So he said that Cincinnati reminded him a lot of home, and he feels kind of that Midwestern vibe now he's in Cincinnati. So I think he's really settling into his new environment, to his new team, and he's getting more and more comfortable with the playbook. So I do expect him to play against the Commanders and potentially, play with the starters in the first couple of quarters. And I hope to see, some targets come his way because I think he's got a lot to offer right now.
We do have a video on our YouTube channel about Noah Fant shortly after he signed, so check that out. It's kind of briefly chronicles his career and background, that sort of thing as well. So check that out, and hope you enjoy that. But yeah, going back to Hudson, I failed to mention this when I made that humorous note. I thought it was funny on his first touchdown catch how much he cradled the football. I guess unfortunate lesson learned from week 1 last year. But I mean, I thought it was really funny that he was, as he was getting contact near the goal line, he's like, I am just, holding on to this thing for dear life. And he made some good plays in the preseason. That's for sure. Yeah. I agree with you. I think Fant is going to be integrated into this offense very, very nicely. I think they've got some big plans for him, and that yards after the catch aspect, if you go back and look at some of the clips we have in that Noah Fant video, some were kind of, floating passes down the sideline that he just streaked down the sideline, outran everybody. So, I mean, he has shown a yards after the catch ability. He has shown good hands and just seems like an all around good player at that position that the Bengals are looking for. Going unnoticed, I think it was Zach Taylor either today, meaning Wednesday, or Tuesday. He had said there was a quote out there that said Drew Sample is the best point of attack, one of the best point of attack blocking tight ends in the NFL. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. You still go back and you go, okay, is that a kind of player you want to draft in the second round? But still, he has worth. He's kind of that Ryan Hewitt-ish type of role, that sort of thing. And that being said, the Bengals look pretty deep at that position, and that's good to see. I'm really curious to see how this Burton Charlie Jones thing ends up continuing to play out over the next couple of weeks. And then, of course, the running back situation behind Chase Brown, how that all shakes out. Samaje Perine was back deep on the opening kickoff. He didn't field it, but he was back there. So they're going to use him in a variety of ways as well. But those are some of the things I'm going to be looking for. And I don't expect the same slow start from the offense, at least going into the regular season, based on, yes, only one quarter of preseason play in week 1 against some backups. But just from what I saw, I feel a bit more confident from that side of the ball, kind of hitting the ground running as the season starts.
I think specifically with the receivers, everything is kind of going as you would hope. Obviously, Chase and Higgins are like they are who they are. I think Andre Yosevach continues to grow in these practices and get even on the more of the same page with Burrow. It was kind of surprising how some people didn't think that Charlie Jones had this top 4 or 5 spot in the depth chart, but he's had his best overall training camp, is healthiest for sure. Like he's never really been in this position going into the regular season, and he's taking advantage of that. And again, like you're not expecting a ton of production from him, but just being available and getting on the same page with these guys and getting, snaps and opportunities with the first team. That's been great to see. It's not exactly been the same with Jermaine Burton because now he's missed a couple of practices, but I thought he was also trending in the right direction before that. And by the way, like that one punt that he fielded against the Eagles where he ran like 20 yards just to catch it and field it. And then he ran another 32 with the ball in his hand. So he's taking advantage of these special teams opportunities, and he needs to if he wants to make sure that he's active on game days and has a chance to play.
I think someone, it was Brucey B saying, I hope Miles Murphy flashes. That would be a good thing, particularly with the Hendrickson situation still looming. Again, credit to Hendrickson. He is out there, and does seem to be appearing to work with some of the younger defensive linemen, particularly Shamar Stewart, on some tips and tricks and that sort of thing. So credit to him at least on that front to do that, but hopefully that gets settled sooner rather than later. We'll see how that continues to play out there. But the Bengals now have a lot of spots settled. They have shown some depth. They have shown some areas of concern going forward, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy, CINCY podcast channel, where you can get our show, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. They just had a show on Tuesday night, so go check that out. As well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, where you can get their videos on our YouTube channel as well. So check that out. And of course, the coach and Willie Lutz, they know ball. So go get those slate of shows, subscribe to the channel, leave us a review. And now those shows are brought to you in part by FanDuel. And so that is really, really cool that we are partnering up with them. One of the biggest name in sports betting. So we are very excited about that partnership going forward. And of course, you got to keep your eye on the lines. Do the lines matter as much in preseason, John? I'd like to hear our people out. I mean, are you betting on preseason games? Are you betting on the coin toss? Are you betting on the over-under? It would seem preseason games would be so difficult to bet on, right? I mean, just because it's such a wild card with a mishmash of players and all that kind of stuff.
I would think so too, but my cousin sent us a slip from courtesy of FanDuel where he had multi touchdowns in like the Eagles game and the Falcons game and the Raiders game. I'm like,
oh, there you
good
go,
luck, man. Like, all right, sure, you want to sweat that out on August 7th? Could be my guess, but that's not for me yet.
It's like over-unders. It would feel like, man, do you set the line at like 24 collective, or do you set it at like 70? You know what I mean? It's like, what do you do in these preseason games? It's weird, but no, we're pleased to be linking up with FanDuel and of course Foco, the fans only company. They've dropped some new bobbleheads as of Wednesday morning. The 2 biggest stars in Cincinnati sports right now, Ellie De La Cruz and Joe Burrow. Some brand new ones for you, exclusive to Foco. So go to foco.com, or if you're watching in our either the Cincy Jungle Facebook page or our YouTube channel, that link is in the description to go click on those. So do that and tell them we sent you. Oh, John, what do we have to talk about this more? Oh my gosh, there is one glaring spot on the offensive line that just is not. We were hoping it would be addressed in a different way. It was not. And so now there are more rumblings aside from Patrick not having the best outing in preseason 1. Now Lucas Patrick is, kind of getting some more criticism from training camp practices. And so now we're sitting here saying, okay, well, let's sift through the options. It's you stick with Patrick and hope that he just, new scenery, all that kind of stuff. Maybe he just had a hiccup and has had a rough few days. You roll with Cody Ford. You try Cordell Volson. These are all the guys who have been career backups / swing players / played different positions, started a few games here and there, that sort of thing. And yet there still doesn't seem to be a solution to the right guard problem. The Bengals moved on from Alex Kappa because after a first, initially it looked like he was playing pretty well, and then some injuries and other things caught up to him. Bengals moved on, and you kind of felt like, okay, is this Brandon Scherf time? Is it Will Hernandez time? Hernandez re-signed with the Cardinals. So now your options continue to dwindle, and you have other players on your current roster that you say, hey, could there be a tick up in performance if this Lucas Patrick struggle continues? The Bengals are just in a tough space right now at this position, and with Fairchild stepping in and playing pretty well at the left guard spot, at least through one game in training camp, this is kind of now the spotlight is on this position right now to rectify what needs to happen here.
The right guard spot is so bad that people have, I think, been crowning Dylan Fairchild a bit too early just because he looks comparatively significantly better.
Yeah.
Like the Bengals have to be really happy that pick looks pretty clean thus far. But obviously, he's just one preseason game into his NFL career. Temper some expectations. Everything at right guard, though, is predictably bad. Like, who would have thought that an offense with the aspirations being top 5 going into training camp with Cody Ford, Lucas Patrick, and then emergency options of a 5th-round rookie in Cordell Volson, you're not finding a sensible solution there. That's not exactly the most shocking development. I know that they like what Cody Ford brings to the table from Monday to Saturday, albeit Sundays are a bit shaky for him, right? But like, there's a reason why Cody Ford is still around. Like, they love him in the building, they love him at practice, love him in meetings, and there are spots for those guys on the roster. But if you're counting on them to be a legitimate option to start, you typically need to look someplace else. But then Lucas Patrick is also a very known commodity. He's been in the NFL for damn near 10 years. He's never really been a full-time starter at any of the 3 positions that he's played. He's never been reliable to start for 17 games. So those were your two like secure options, and it's now everyone's kind of scratching their head and saying, oh, neither of these guys is particularly working out. But of course, Jalen Rivers, the 5th-round rookie out of Miami, he struggled a little bit against the Eagles at left tackle. It was his first game there, and I think the combination of Patrick also struggling, being the weakest link on the starting offensive line, combined with Rivers not exactly looking the part at tackle, I think that spurred their decision to then move Rivers to inside right guard with the second team. I think he's been there really since this past weekend. He hasn't really gotten any reps with the first team yet, but Patrick is not giving them any quality reps in practice now, and you're seeing ugly offensive reps from the offensive line. You're seeing Joe Burrow getting hit by Shamar Stewart, who's still a rookie, doesn't realize that he can't touch the quarterback, but all that pressure was caused by Lucas Patrick not being able to pick up a stunt, which happened a couple of times because Joseph Ossai also got through, right? So it is impacting the practice quality right now. It's impacting Burrow's safety, which is just the last place that you want to be in when you're trying to run back with this offense. So this is you mentioned it's a tough scene. It's a tough scene that they created, and I can't imagine that they can't be too surprised that this is the outcome, because everyone was clamoring for them to do something different, and they didn't.
The lack of urgency of and maybe they do recognize the issue and just are kind of not doing much to rectify it, but the lack of urgency of saying, hey, this needs an upgrade. And yeah, by the way, Shamar, you missed some time, buddy. You're not supposed to touch the quarterback in practice, dude. Maybe you missed that tutoring session from.
He's so desperate for a sack, Anthony. He's just.
I know. He didn't have many in college, and yeah, I know. I get it. But no, that is extremely well put, John. The fact that this is now creating a full domino effect. And oh, by the way, most people think that Joe Burrow is having his best training camp of his career because, 1, he's a year older, that sort of thing. But 2, he's healthy. He's got his guys back, and many of his guys are now secure long-term, namely the 2 star wide receivers. And so things are clicking, except for when there is a breakdown at this position. And not only now, it's a trickle-down effect. It's in practice, and then it showed up in gameplay as well. So, look, I don't want to, bang too hard on Lucas Patrick. Maybe he turns a corner and ends up being a stable player at that position, and that is the hope. But the Bengals should be looking around at other options. And really, right now, there's only a couple on the free agent market that would make sense. They may look also, John, at cuts throughout the preseason to see who kind of flies out there as well. But this was a guy that they kind of earmarked not only to get in free agency, but also to say, hey, I mean, we're going to get you with the ones. We're going to play. And it is just not working well right now. It is not working well.
The thing about 4 years ago when they traded Billy Price for BJ Hill, right? I'm sure everyone would love a trade like that where they could get a guard. But of course, Billy Price was a backup offensive lineman, on his way to being not ended up worth a first round pick. And BJ Hill was just, a stable rotational defensive tackle. And that's kind of the state of the offensive line, defensive line depth disparity around the league. You're not going to be able to find like a starting caliber offensive lineman on the trade market or maybe even on waivers, right? Like they're in a tough spot right now in terms of adding someone aside from the obvious options, obviously, in Brandon Scherf and Dalton Risner. And yeah, I'm with you in terms like you don't want to bash Patrick for being the player that he is. At the end of the day, he's Lucas Patrick, right? And it's up to the Bengals to recognize that, to realize who he is, to scout him appropriately, and to go forward with an appropriate role, which is probably just being able to back up all 3 interior offensive line spots. And this is why, if there's any hope for this right now, outside of an external addition, it's to see what Rivers can do in this spot. And, he's never played on the right side before, which is a large concern. But if you are concerned about his foot speed and his quickness and his pass sets at tackle, you think that a move inside the guard, where he has played left guard plenty of times at Miami, he just hasn't played on the right side, but now he's getting that work in practice. The hope is that his strengths, his attributes are best highlighted in a more condensed space, and he can hold up to power a little bit better than what Patrick can, but he also has the hand usage and the hand technique that maybe Cody Ford doesn't exactly have. So he looks like not their most I don't want to say most promising, but he's the least known commodity that they have. So there's at least some upside to getting him on the field to see what he can do. And that's why they're giving him some reps there, because I think they do realize that they need to do something. It's just a matter of how aggressive are they to do something, which is probably less aggressive than what we would all do.
Looking at a short list, and I believe this is pretty updated right now, of available guards out there: Brandon Scherf, Shaq Mason, John Feliciano, Cody Whitehair, and of course the mercenary Dalton Reisner. And then there's Glowinski and other players that have a little bit of a drop off from that Reisner threshold. But I mean, is there harm in doing some due diligence in some of these guys? It still strikes me as a bit odd as Scherf being out there. John, this might be a situation where that player guarantees in terms of contracts usually kick in after, what is it, game 1, game 2, for a fully guaranteed or not fully guaranteed, or all those guarantees. So we've seen the Bengals sign guys after week 1, week 2, as to avoid a full year type of contract. And so maybe they roll with these guys for a game or two, and if it is catastrophic, then they say, okay, we gotta get one of these guys on the horn and in here right away. You run the risk, though, John, particularly with an early game against the Cleveland Browns with a top pick that they just invested on the defensive line. Of course, Myles Garrett, who likes to drive fast, apparently. You run the risk of putting Joe Burrow at risk by doing that, if that is the Bengals' plan. And again, that is kind of cutting corners at this point, and that goes back a little bit to if that is the mindset. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but we have seen that before, where the Bengals have brought in players a game or two into the season so as to avoid the full contract that goes into play at that point. But I don't know if that's the plan. I don't know if they are just more confident and see things out of these guys that they have on the roster that we do not see. I know there are high hopes for Jalen Rivers as kind of a versatile guy that can do a number of different things, and maybe he becomes the guy. And again, maybe Patrick turns the corner, but right now that is just a glaring spot that the Bengals, they technically addressed it, but you almost wonder now if even a banged up older Kappa is an upgrade, or would have been an upgrade to keep him instead of this collection of guys that have kind of been in and out of starting roles and that sort of thing.
It's just, it stinks that something has to happen to Joe Burrow for them to do anything.
It's absurd.
It's never a preventative action. It's always just
reactive. Reactive.
Forgot to buy the insurance here, because that's how.
Yeah.
You watch Aaron Donald throw him like a rag doll in the Super Bowl, and of course that's how Alex Kappa signs the biggest guard contract in Bengals history. And then they drafted Cordell Volson to take the place of Jackson Carman. This offseason, you just left with the worst starting guard duo in the NFL, and your replacements are a third-round rookie who, again, is looking promising, but it's not exactly the most aggressive addition. And then you sign a guy in Patrick to essentially a little bit more than vet minimum and re-sign Cody Ford. Like, that's just, it's not enough. Everyone knew that it wasn't enough. So there's no sympathy here from the sense of like, these guys aren't working out, but the Bengals at least tried. I don't think they really did.
I don't want to say bare minimum, but when you say just past the vet minimum, I would say it's just past the bare minimum, right? I mean, for having the quarterback that you have, having the offense that you have, having the defensive struggles that you had, that you are trying to rebuild this year, it hasn't been enough. And I think we all hoped, obviously, that Patrick will come in here, succeed, and be a steady presence. It just has not come to fruition. We may be singing a different tune 2 weeks from now, but I think the Bengals need to start doing some due diligence. They have started a little bit, like you said, giving Jalen Rivers a little more looks with the twos and that sort of thing. Maybe he becomes a good player at guard. I think, like you said, maybe NFL tackle is potentially a little too much for him, but given his overall skill set and talent, maybe kicking him inside is going to be something where he can prolong his career and be a solid pro inside. But still, this is, I mean, months since he's been drafted and weeks into the practice situation and days into this spot, really, that hoping for a miracle right away from Jalen Rivers is just really not fair. So again, I don't foresee, unless there is a hyper team friendly deal, I don't see a Scherf signing. I think he's going to probably want a good amount of money, and if and when he signs, it could be shortly after the commencement of the season, or it could be, way late into training camp. But I could see Reisner as kind of being a different, an option they look at, just because he could be a little more affordable, could do his standard 1-year deal, 2-year deal, that sort of thing, and just, make it manageable for themselves. But right now, again, it's this organizational, it's stubbornness, but it's also arrogance. It's like, we know what we've got. You guys on the outside you're not here every day. You're not in the meetings. True. But I mean, this has been the interior play of the Bengals offensive line has been a problem literally since Joe Burrow has been here. So at some point, when do you say, let's do a holistic fix of this spot and this spot? Maybe they fix the left guard spot with Fairchild. I hope so. But now there's this glaring issue on the offensive line. You can't have Pro Bowlers at every single spot. We know that. This isn't Madden franchise mode where you trade and all that kind of stuff. Get capable guys. Guys who've shown the ability to start and be stable on the offensive line, and you'll be fine.
It's just crazy how the Bengals have never shied away from properly valuing the quarterback spot and properly valuing guys that directly help him, except for this position. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, especially considering how much of a hindrance that the position specifically has been to this team, either winning the Super Bowl or getting to the Super Bowl. And one last thing I'll say, like, I do think that there's weight to them potentially waiting into the regular season to make sure that the contract is not fully guaranteed. But it's like, it's the same thing with Trey. If that decision doesn't work out in the long run, paying Trey Hendrickson or paying Brendan Scherf what would be like, like a 1-year, $5 million deal. Say that he flames out, right? Say that Trey flames out after this year. If that does happen, nobody's going to blame you for at least trying, right? No, it's not a decision.
We would applaud them. Exactly. We would applaud them.
It's not a decision that's going to ruin them financially. They eat the L and they go on with it. It's what happened with Lyle Collins. No one blames them for going out there and signing Lyle Collins, but of course that contract was so protected for the team and everything like that, and they wouldn't sign him unless it was that case. But no one is going to blame you if this decision doesn't work out. But if something needs to happen, because if you just sit on your hands and potentially risk having both Cody Ford and Lucas Patrick not be enough, everything is on you at that point.
Everything is on you. And there are so many past, and we can go on and on about this forever. And we won't.
We did this.
Yeah. But there are so many examples of the Bengals getting just awesome offensive linemen in the past. Max Montoya, I think, was a 7th round pick or 9th round pick. You had Clint Bowling, who was a capable offensive line. If you had a Clint Bowling type right now at right guard, doesn't have to be even a Kevin Zeiler. If you had a Clint Bowling type who was steady and capable, not a star player, just steady and capable, if you had a guy like that, let's go. But they don't. Anyway, he was a 4th round pick. So I think they hang their laurels at times on, hey, we can still find these guys late in the draft, or, some of these guys who were drafted late in the draft by other teams. We feel that we can groom them here and get them into the right spot, that sort of thing. It hasn't always worked out. Yes, there's been amazing finds that they have done at the guard position, but it hasn't always worked out. And then at the same time, John, they still seemingly, like you said, get hung up on what they perceive as risky contracts to players because of getting burned by your Antonio Bryant's, Lavernius Coles to a lesser degree, that sort of thing. And so they say that's when they crawled back in their free agency shell and that sort of thing. But I mean, you see the best teams in the league. You see that the teams that are competitive, hyper competitive year in, year out, they're trading for players. They're getting active in outside free agency. They are re-signing their stars, that sort of thing. The Bengals kind of pick and choose. They don't run the whole gamut of that as of now. And again, I don't want to bash them as an organization across the board, because they have spent a lot of money this offseason in re-signing their 2-star wide receivers. They brought in Mike Gesicki. We know all the good things that they have done. They brought in Fant, who isn't a great blocker, but he can probably help out a little bit in that respect. But still, you want to give your team the best chance to succeed. And there is a glaring spot on this roster that has existed even before we're hammering on Patrick. This has existed for a while now, and it still has not been remedied, and it's frustrating.
At the very least, if there's a fight to be had, at least Lucas Patrick will be in the mix of that. So shout out to him for protecting the quarterback.
Yeah.
Protect.
Yeah. And protection after the play.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine, I guess. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to start to wrap things up and get on out of here. Before we do, John, any other news and notes you want to touch on before we drop the mic and get on out of here that our fine folks who are listening either live or after the fact think that you think that they should know?
I just kind of thought that Charlie Goldsmith had an interview with Shamar Stewart the other day, and I really liked what he had to say about what Trey has been telling him as they've been kind of working together in between reps. Shamar Stewart on Trey Hendrickson said, quote, his biggest thing is that me and you are not the same. But if I can give you a little couple details to make your game better, and you can flip it to where it works for you, at the end of the day, you become a little bit better. One day, eventually, I'll be like him. And I feel like that's a really good mindset for Trey to instill in Shamar, because obviously they are a complete opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of where they are and as professionals and as technicians at the game. And that's good for Trey to kind of instill that in him and say, hey, like how I win and how you win is probably going to be two different things, but here are some things that you can apply that fits your skill set that works for me. And then you can kind of slowly add them to your repertoire. And anything that kind of helps in that regard is going to, he's at this point, the biggest boost to this Bengals pass rush outside of what they had last year, right? Like some guys are going to play more than they did last year, but in terms of an injection of athleticism and burst and everything like that, it's juice, right? Like the more useful that can be, where teams can't just easily take away from him because he doesn't know what he's doing, the better this pass rush can be. So I thought that was really promising to hear what Stewart had to say about his ongoing relationship with Trey.
I love that. Good nugget. And that is good advice for really anyone in the professional world, what football or not. If you're new in a position or you're doing different things, someone's been there a little longer, you say, look, I mean, this is how I do things. This is how I do my job. This is what's made me successful, but you are not a carbon copy of me. Take some of these things, use them, use what works for you. It doesn't have to be every single thing I'm telling you, but use what works for you. And you should find other success coupled with your own style, and in this case, style of play. So I like that a lot. That's a great quote, and thanks for bringing that up. Let's drop the mic and get on out of here. It's hard. I don't know if you've got to drop a mic drop after that one, John, but go for it, my friend.
I got a little bit of a soapbox because the first week of the preseason is when we see like the new advertisements for like the NFL and just football in general. And there's one that really irks me. It's like the loose plot is that there are a bunch of Buffalo Bills fans who are waiting for a flight, and the flight has been delayed. And as soon as this one fan gets the announcement that the flight has been delayed, he eagerly gets out his like tablet and it opens up NFL Plus, and it's an NFL Plus advertisement. So now he can watch the Bills game. And everyone's like all shocked, like, "Oh, you're watching on your tablet or whatever?" You're like, "Yeah, I got NFL Plus." If you had that tablet and you were already waiting for the flight, why weren't you already watching the game? You just now turned it on knowing that the flight was delayed. If you are a real fan, you are watching that game the minute that you're situated waiting for your flight in the first place. So completely unrealistic ad. 0 out of 5 stars for me.
Yeah, and you would be the annoying guy in line, annoying all the other passengers because you're not paying attention about keeping the line moving and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you got to be that guy. I get it. just a couple of things. Again, thanks to Believe and FanDuel for the new partnership that we forged here. Really, really cool. And of course, for all of your sports betting, fantasy football needs, go to FanDuel. We'll be doing some fun things regarding lines and that sort of thing throughout the season. Of course, please play and gamble responsibly as always, but keep it to FanDuel and our slate of shows on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel for all of the betting lines and different stuff we'll be throwing in. Hey, if you want us to cover something, if you want us to do a segment, let us know. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on X, anything like that. And a couple little housekeeping things. Number one, we are going to probably do a show, again, later this week, and we may have a very special guest. We're going to work on that. So we will keep you posted on that. We have an opportunity potentially to speak to someone we feel is pretty cool. So we're gonna work on that and see if we can get that to you either later this week or next. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. And I know we have a couple of people who have inquired, but if you have some video and or social media production skills and you want to potentially help our show out and the Believe in Cincy shows out, reach out to us. We may have a paid position for you. We'll see what happens. But if you have some experience in that, you like what we do, not only on this show, but the other slate of shows, let us know. We are growing. We are forging new partnerships, and we need all hands on deck. So if you've got some production experience, let us know. We would love to speak to you. But us begging for more help aside, thank you very much for listening to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Keep it to CincyJungle.com and A to Z Sports.com, where that guy covers the Cincinnati Bengals. Our thanks to Foco, the fans only company. New bobbleheads dropped. Click the link in our YouTube channel, as well as to FanDuel, and of course the Believe Podcast Network. John, we won't take as big of a hiatus during this important time next time. I don't know if I want to promise, but I'm going to do my best on that. I apologize to you.
We'll be here when we be here.
Yeah, you guys all better be back to check us out. But no, thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning in live. Thanks for listening after the fact. And we are out of here.